Hello children, how are you? I hope you all are fit and fine. Well, I'm Satinder Kaur and today I'll be taking up lesson 3 of Democratic Politics for class 9. And the name of the lesson is Electoral Politics. Children, by now you all know that democracy is the government by the people. But is it possible for the people to govern directly? No. So what do? They elect their representatives who govern on their behalf. Now, how are these representatives elected? In this lesson, we shall learn about the entire process of elections step by step. We shall also talk about why elections are necessary and how they are useful in a democracy. So let's begin by reading out this news report. The time is after midnight. An expectant crowd sitting for the past 5 hours in a chalk of the town is waiting for its leader to come. The organizers assure and reassure the crowd that he would be here any moment. The crowd stands up whenever a passing vehicle comes that way. It arouses hope that he has come. The leader is Mr. Devi Lal, Chief Minister of the Haryana Sangharsh Samiti, who was to address a meeting in Karnal on Thursday night. The 76-year-old leader is a very busy man these days. His day starts at 8 a.m. and ends after 11 p.m. He had already addressed 9 election meetings since morning, been constantly addressing public meetings for the past 23 months and preparing for this election. So children, this newspaper report is about assembly elections in Haryana in 1987. The state had been ruled by Congress party-led government since 1982. Chaudhry Devi Lal, an opposition leader at that time, led a movement called Nyay Yudh and formed a new party called Lok Dal. His party joined the other opposition parties to form a front against the Congress in the coming elections. In the election campaign, Devi Lal said that if his party won the elections, his government would waive loans of farmers and small businessmen. Now, people were unhappy with the existing government. They were also attracted by Devi Lal's promises. Now, when the elections were held, they voted in favor of Lok Dal and its allies. Lok Dal and its partners won 76 seats out of total 90 seats. Lok Dal alone won 60 seats and had a clear majority in the assembly. Now, after the declaration of results, the sitting chief minister resigned and the newly elected members of the Legislative Assembly chose Devi Lal as their leader. As soon as Devi Lal became the chief minister, his government issued an order waiving the outstanding loans of farmers, agricultural laborers and small businessmen. His party ruled the state for the next 4 years. But when elections were held in 1991 again, his party failed to win the popular support. This time, the Congress won the elections and formed the government. Now, what do we conclude from this news story? First, that the party that wins elections forms the government, and second, if the people are unhappy with the ruling party, they can vote against it in the next elections. Children, elections take place regularly in any democracy. There are more than 100 countries in the world in which elections take place to choose people's representatives. Elections are also held in many countries that are not democratic. But why do we need elections? Let's try to imagine a democracy without elections. A rule of the people is possible without any elections if all the people can sit together every day and take all the decisions. This is not possible in any large community. Nor is it possible for everyone to have the time and knowledge to take decisions on all matters. Therefore, in most democracies, people rule through their representatives. Now, is there a democratic way of selecting representatives without elections? Let's think of a place where representatives are selected on the basis of age and experience, or a place where they are chosen on the basis of education or knowledge. There could be some difficulty in deciding on who is more experienced and knowledgeable. But let us say the people can resolve these difficulties. Clearly, such a place does not require elections. But can we call this place a democracy? How do we find out if the people like their representatives or not? How do we ensure that these representatives rule as per the wishes of the people? How to make sure that those who the people don't like do not remain their representatives? This requires a mechanism by which people can choose their representatives at regular intervals and change them if they wish to do so. This mechanism is called election. Therefore, elections are considered essential in our times for any representative democracy. In an election, the voters make many choices. First, they can choose who will make laws for them. Second, they can choose who will form the government and take major decisions. And third, they can choose the party whose policies will guide the government and lawmaking. Now, elections can be held in many ways. All democratic countries hold elections, but most non-democratic countries also hold some kind of elections. How do we distinguish democratic elections from any other elections? Let's talk about some minimum conditions of a democratic elections. First, everyone should be able to choose. This means that everyone should have one vote and every vote should have equal value. Second, there should be something to choose from. Parties and candidates should be free to contest elections and should offer some real choice to the voters. Third, the choice should be offered at regular intervals. Elections must be held regularly after every few years. Fourth, the candidate preferred by the people should get elected. Fifth, elections should be conducted in a free and fair manner where people can choose as they really wish. These might look like very simple and easy conditions, but there are many countries where these conditions are not fulfilled. Now we shall apply these conditions to the elections held in our country to see if we can call these democratic elections. But before that, let's consider this question. Is it good to have political competition? Children, elections are all about political competition. If there is no competition, elections will become pointless. But is it good to have political competition? Clearly, an electoral competition has many demerits. It creates a sense of disunity and factionalism in every locality. You would have heard of people complaining of party politics in your locality. Different political parties and leaders often level allegations against one another. Parties and candidates often use dirty tricks to win the elections. Some people say that this pressure to win electoral fights does not allow sensible long-term policies to be formulated. Some good people who may wish to serve the country do not enter this arena. They do not like the idea of being dragged into unhealthy competition. Our constitution makers were aware of these problems, yet they opted for free competition in elections as the way to select our future leaders. They did so because this system works better in the long run. In an ideal world, all political leaders know what is good for the people and are motivated only by a desire to serve them. Political competition is not necessary in such an ideal world, but that is not what happens in real life. Political leaders all over the world, like all other professionals, are motivated by a desire to advance their political careers. They want to remain in power or get power and positions for themselves. They may wish to serve the people as well, but it is risky to depend entirely on their sense of duty. Besides, even when they wish to serve the people, they may not know what is required to do so, or their ideas may not match what the people really want. How do we deal with this real life situation? One way is to try and improve the knowledge and character of political leaders. The other and the more realistic way is to set up a system where political leaders are rewarded for serving the people and punished for not doing so. Who decides this reward or punishment? The simple answer is the people. That is what electoral competition does. Regular electoral competition provides incentives to political parties and leaders. They know that if they raise issues that people want to be raised, their popularity and chances of victory will increase in the next elections. But if they fail to satisfy the voters with their work, they will not be able to win again. So, if a political party is motivated only by desire to be in power, even then it will be forced to serve the people. This is a bit like the way market works. Even if a shopkeeper is interested only in his profit, he is forced to give good service to the customers. If he does not, the customer will go to some other shop. Similarly, political competition may cause divisions and some ugliness, but it finally helps to force political parties and leaders to serve the people. Now let's move ahead and see, are Indian elections democratic? To answer this question, let's take a look at how elections are held in India. Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha assembly elections are held regularly after every 5 years. After 5 years, the term of all the elected representatives comes to an end. The Lok Sabha or Vidhan Sabha stands dissolved. Elections are held in all constituencies at the same time, either on the same day or within a few days. This is called a general election. Sometimes election is held only for one constituency to fill the vacancy caused by death or resignation of a member. This is called a by-election. However, in this lesson we shall focus on general elections. Now let's start with electoral constituencies. Children, you read about the people of Haryana electing 90 MLAs. You may have wondered how they did that. Did every person in Haryana vote for all the 90 MLAs? You know, children, that this is not the case. In our country, we follow an area-based system of representation. The country is divided into different areas for purpose of elections. These areas are called electoral constituencies. The voters who live in an area elect one representative. For Lok Sabha elections, the country is divided into 543 constituencies. The representative elected from each constituency is called a member of parliament or an MP. One of the features of a democratic elections is that every vote should have equal vote. That is why our constitution requires that each constituency should have a roughly equal population living within it. Similarly, each state is divided into a specific number of assembly constituencies. In this case, the elected representative is called the member of the Legislative Assembly or an MLA. Each parliamentary constituency has within it several assembly constituencies. The same principle applies for panchayat and municipal elections. Each village or town is divided into several wards that are like constituencies. Each ward elects one member of the village or the urban local body. Sometimes these constituencies are counted as seats, for each constituency represents one seat in the assembly. When we say that Lok Dal won 60 seats in Haryana, It means that candidates of Lok Dal won in 60 assembly constituencies in the state, and thus Lok Dal had 60 MLAs in the state assembly. There are reserved constituencies too. Our constitution entitles every citizen to elect his or her representative and to be elected as a representative. The constitution makers, however, were worried that in an open electoral competition, certain weaker sections may not stand a good chance to get elected to the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies. If that happens, our parliament and assemblies would be deprived of the voice of a significant section of our population. That would make our democracy less representative and less democratic. So, the makers of our constitution thought of a special system of reserved constituencies for the weaker sections. Some constituencies are reserved for people who belong to the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. In a SC reserved constituency, only someone who belongs to the scheduled caste can stand for elections. Similarly, only those belonging to the scheduled tribes can contest election from a constituency reserved for STs. Currently, in the Lok Sabha, 84 seats are reserved for the scheduled castes and 47 for the scheduled tribes. This number is in proportion to their share in the total population. Thus, the reserved seats for SC and ST do not take away the legitimate share of any other social group. This system of reservation was extended later to other weaker sections at the district and local level. In many states, seats in rural and urban local bodies, that is panchayats and municipalities and corporations, are now reserved for other backward classes as well. However, the proportion of seats reserved varies from state to state. Similarly, 1/3 of the seats are reserved in rural and urban local bodies for women candidates. Now look at this map, children. It shows state-wise Lok Sabha constituencies in our country. There are total 543 constituencies, out of which 412 are general constituencies. They are shown in white color. 84 are reserved for scheduled castes. They are shown in red color. 47 constituencies are reserved for scheduled tribes. These are shown in green color. Now look at the information given with the map and answer these questions. The first question is, which states have more than 30 Lok Sabha constituencies? Children, you can see that Bihar, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal have more than 30 Lok Sabha constituencies. The next question is, why do some states have a large number of constituencies? And the answer is, the states that have large population have a large number of constituencies because the constituencies are demarcated on the basis of population. Now the next question, why are some constituencies small in area while others are very big? Now the reason for this is the density of population is more in such areas. Similarly, some constituencies are big because density of population is less there. Now let's take up the last question. Are the constituencies reserved for the SCs and STs evenly spread all over the entire country, or are there more in some areas? So children, if you look carefully, you will find that the constituencies for the SCs and STs are not evenly spread over the entire country. ST constituencies are more in number in states like Bihar, Odisha, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. Now let's move ahead and talk about the voters list. Once the constituencies are decided, the next step is to decide who can vote and who cannot. This decision cannot be left to anyone till the last day. In a democratic election, The list of those who are eligible to vote is prepared much before the elections and given to everyone. This list is officially called the electoral roll and is commonly known as the voters list. This is an important step for it is linked to the first condition of a democratic election, that is, everyone should get an equal opportunity to choose representatives. Earlier, we talked about the principle of universal adult franchise. In practice, it means that everyone should have one vote and each vote should have one equal value. No one should be denied the right to vote without a good reason. Different citizens differ from one another in many ways. Some are rich, some are poor, some are highly educated, some are not so educated or not educated at all. Some are kind, others are not so kind, but all of them are human beings with their own needs and views. That is why all of them deserve to have an equal say in decisions that affect them. In our country, all the citizens aged 18 years and above can vote in an election. Every citizen has the right to vote regardless of his or her caste, religion, or gender. Some criminals and persons with unsound mind can be denied the right to vote, but only in rare situations. It is the responsibility of the government to get the names of all eligible voters put on the voters list. As new persons attain voting age, names are added to the voters list. Names of those who move out of a place or those who are dead are deleted. A complete revision of the list takes place every 5 years. This is done to ensure that it remains up to date. In the last few years, a new system of election photo identity card, that is, EPIC, has been introduced. The government has tried to give this card to every person on the voters list. The voters are required to carry this card when they go out to vote so that no one can vote for someone else. But the card is not yet compulsory for voting. For voting, the voters can show many other proofs of identity like the ration card or the driving license. Children, we noted above that in a democratic election, people should have a real choice. This happens only when there are almost no restrictions on anyone to contest an election. This is what our system provides. Anyone who can be a voter can also be a candidate in the elections. The only difference is that in order to be a candidate, the minimum age is 25 years, while it is only 18 years for being a voter. There are some other restrictions on criminals, etc. But these apply in very extreme cases. Political parties nominate their candidates who get the party symbol and support. Party's nomination is often called party ticket. Every person who wishes to contest an election has to fill a nomination form and give some money as security deposit. Recently, a new system of declaration has been introduced on direction from the Supreme Court. Every candidate has to make a legal declaration giving full details of serious criminal cases pending against the candidate, details of the assets and liabilities of the candidate and his or her family, and educational qualifications of the candidate. This information has to be made public. This provides an opportunity to the voters to make their decision on the basis of the information provided by the candidates. Now the question is, why is there no educational qualification for holding such an important position when some kind of educational qualification is needed for any other job in the country? The arguments in favor of this are, if, for example, a graduate degree like BA, BCom or BSc was made compulsory for candidates, more than 90% of the citizens will become ineligible to contest elections. So children, that was all about today's session. Now let's move ahead and take up a few questions. Here we have some questions with options and you have to choose the correct option. Are you ready? The first question is, what is the total number of Lok Sabha constituencies in our country? And the options are 500, 543, 550 or 552. And the correct option is, yes, 543. The second question is, the minimum age required for being a voter is, and the options are 25 years, 21 years, 18 years or 15 years. And the correct option is 18 years. Let's move ahead and take up the next question. How many seats are reserved in the Lok Sabha for the scheduled caste? And the options are 47, 60, 84 or 100. And the correct option is, yes, 84. Now the next question. Which of these is not a feature of Indian democracy? And the options are, India has the largest number of voters in the world. India's election commission is very powerful. In India, everyone above the age of 18 years has a right to vote. Or in India, the losing parties refuse to accept the electoral verdict. And the correct option is, in India, the losing parties refuse to accept the electoral verdict. Now the next question. What is a constituency? And the options are, place where the copy of constitution is kept, a particular area from where voters elect representatives to the Lok Sabha or Vidhan Sabha, a body of voters, or none of the above. And the correct option is, yes, a particular area from where voters elect a representative to the Lok Sabha or Vidhan Sabha. Now the last question. Which body conducts the elections in India? And the options are Supreme Court, Parliament, Cabinet or Election Commission. And the answer is Election Commission. Very good. So children, with this we come to the end of today's video. I'm sure you liked it and got to know a great deal about different stages of elections, from the drawing of boundaries of different constituencies to the filing of nominations. You also learnt about why elections are necessary and what makes elections in India democratic. That's all for today. I'll be back with the second part of the lesson soon. Till then, stay healthy, stay happy.